The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 30. Langelus. For my first few hours in Langelus, I saw no sign of what made the domain unique. Its magical technology was impressive, yes, but not dissimilar from what I had seen in San Francisco. I spoke with several people who had opinions on Langelus's most notorious citizens, but it was some time before I glimpsed any of them for myself. As I passed through a particularly wealthy neighborhood, I saw a building undergoing construction or renovation, some kind of concert hall, its high walls swooping into bizarre curves that would be impossible to form without magic. As I watched, enormous flying oxen with improbable proportions and coloration floated just above the building's curved gables, bearing incredible amounts of weight. Tiny sprite-like creatures, each wearing an exaggerated smile, buzzed about taking building materials from the backs of the oxen and applying them to the walls. I could guess that the oxen were living manifestations of Tensor's floating disc, while the sprites were likely mage hand or stone shape. They were some of the intelligent living spells known colloquially as runes. While their presence could have been a source of pure wonder to the people of Langelus, their joy and exuberance was no match for the darkness in some mortal hearts. The Lord. There has always been a level of tension between the mortals of Langelus and the residents of Toontown, partly for reasons I will enumerate shortly, and partly because of the rune's chaotic nature. While the origin of runes is not entirely clear, it seems to stem from wild magic, as even the most sober of runes shows an inclination toward mischief and chaos. While some mortals find this endearing, others are infuriated by the havoc they bring. Things have only become worse with the election of Toontown's new judge, a ruthless man with the apt, if unfortunate, name of Judge Doom. It is an open secret that Doom, whose pockets are seemingly bottomless, although no one knows how he came by his tremendous wealth, attained the position through a combination of bribes and blackmail. Doom has vowed to reign in the misrule of Toontown. Because of the eccentric nature of runes, a campaign against misrule is a thin veneer covering a campaign against their very existence. To this end, Doom has fired or discredited every rune member of law enforcement who could stand against him, from Quick Draw McGraw to Inspector Gadget, and replaced them with a gang of personal enforcers called the Rune Patrol. Worse yet, he has invented a magic item called Dip for the sole purpose of executing runes who are convicted of crimes. It should come as no surprise that trials for runes are short, with arrest, conviction, and execution often occurring within the same hour. When I interviewed Doom, he attempted to persuade me as to the dangers of runes and their wild magic. Given my own recent reservations about magic, it is a testament to Doom's utterly cold and charmless nature that I did not find him remotely convincing. He seemed particularly focused on the potential danger of the concert hall I had seen, claiming that the maniacal runes could not be trusted to build anything safe, and that those who entered it would be taking their lives into their hands. According to others I spoke to, the crusade against the concert hall was Doom's latest hobby horse. Unsurprising, perhaps, as its successful construction would serve as continued proof that runes have a valuable role to play. The land. Langelus is divided into two distinct parts. While the mortal area of the city technically comprises many neighborhoods and districts, as one would expect from a metropolis of its size, they have far more in common with one another than with Toontown, where even the streets and buildings are constructed from pure magic. The precise origin of Toontown and its residents is unknown. Some claim that it came from a horrific magical disaster on a distant world, while others believe it was unleashed by experimentation in Haslan, or even dreamed up from whole cloth by Isan the Mad. Whatever its source, Toontown is such a distinctive feature of Langelus that many outsiders consider the two interchangeable, a source of either pride or chagrin to mortal residents, depending on their attitude toward runes. As previously alluded to, there is more to the tension between mortals and runes than runish antics. Runes are sustained entirely by fulfilling their spell function. For instance, a famous Harangon entertainer who embodied Tasha's hideous laughter needed neither food nor sleep in order to survive, only to make others laugh. This means, however, that the living spells I witnessed were far more desirable as employees than mortal laborers. Not only could they work at dizzying heights to create Langelus's breathtaking skyline, for runes have no fear of physical damage, including that from falling, but their employers can pay them a pittance, knowing that the work itself is its own reward. Little wonder that the wealthy of Langelus are able to become ever wealthier, lining their pockets by exploiting rune labor, or that Doom is able to foment anti-rune sentiment among disaffected workers. I spoke to a drunken stonemason who complained at length about the various building projects that living mage hands, stone shapes, and fabricates had taken from him. He let slip, however, that he had recently been offered a year's pay to help take care of a rune construction project, sabotaging it to make sure that it would collapse. He was sure that the rune's handiwork was as erratic as the runes themselves, and if he needed to help things along for people to see that, well, he was just glad to have someone pay him for the privilege of putting the runes out of work, starving them in the process. I had promised to buy the man a drink in exchange for his interview, but I felt no guilt whatsoever at leaving him with the tab. Thankfully, not all of Langelus's citizens see the runes as a threat or a resource, or, in the case of the patrons of the Ink and Parchment Club, a source of titillation. There are those who take pride in the runes and cherish the energy they bring to Langelus. Of these champions, none is so vocal as Marvin Arkme, the eccentric artificer whose inventions include some of the only new runes created since the inception of Runetown. Arkme owns Runetown, and is thus the greatest obstacle between the runes and their enemies. Perhaps it is a sign that my work has made me fatalistic, but I find myself wondering how long he has before Doom makes a more permanent move against him. Dread possibilities. It was when I visited Runetown itself that my survey of the domain took a dark turn. I immediately noticed a familiar quality to the brilliant colors and vibrant sounds of Runetown. Because they were made from pure magic, they should have been unlike anything I had ever seen or heard before, except that I knew I had seen and heard them, and recently. This nagged at the back of my mind as I endured various indignities inherent to visiting Runetown. Brick walls concealed behind illusions of roads, a blast of heat that briefly dissolved me into a puddle before allowing me to reform again, as well as certain surprising pleasures, such as the aroma from the Hero's Feast bakery, which was so delicious that it caused me to float in midair. Trying to get information from most of the runes is an exercise in futility. I can think of few spells whose purpose is to answer questions. And while I was excited to study the magical properties of Runetown, it proved to be less enlightening than I had hoped. There were near constant surges of wild magic whenever I tried to cast a spell or invocation, something that apparently affected all non-rune casters in Runetown, and other unpredictable magical effects at almost every turn, but observing a living spell was similar to observing the same spell as it was cast. As I left Runetown in disappointment, a tiny rain cloud floating over my head, I had the sense of being watched. The air around me grew darker and colder, the malleable nature of Runetown warning me of danger. I cast invisibility to conceal myself from whoever was following me, but the magical energy dissipated the moment I pulled it to myself. As I turned about with eldritch sight, trying to see what was interfering with my spellcasting, a crossbow bolt flew through the space where my head had been a moment before. I whipped around, aiming an eldritch blast toward the place where the crossbow bolt had appeared, at Judge Doom, crouching in the shadows with a crossbow. Even as I wondered why Doom would be attacking me, I remembered the conversation with the loose-lipped stonemason, a man who undoubtedly had a crossbow bolt in his own back right now. Two things happened simultaneously. My eldritch blast fizzled and died, and Judge Doom shimmered with abjuration magic. He was countering my spells, but without using any somatic components. Either Doom knew how to cast spells without movement, or Doom himself was the spell. I could not outrun a madman's crossbow bolt, and I could only think of one useful spell that I could manage before he had time to work another counterspell. I cast Misty Step, vanishing just as another bolt penetrated the place where my heart had been. Wild magic surged again, and it seemed that the magic itself desired to protect me from Judge Doom, for it formed a shield around me as I ran. This time, I recognized in it the color I had seen in Runetown. A color that was not a color. It followed me until I was in a brighter, warmer, and safer neighborhood of Toontown, then vanished. Parting thoughts. I reported the sabotage of the concert hall to the authorities, although I do not know whether they will take any action. With luck, they can at least halt construction before anyone comes to harm. It seems that the strange magical effects that have followed me since San Francisco were somehow linked to wild magic. Perhaps I am simply experiencing surges at a far less frenetic rate than one does in Toontown? Thus far, they have been uniformly helpful, which is a fortunate stroke given the arbitrary nature of wild magic. If Doom truly is some kind of living counterspell or dispel magic, it is tempting to absolve him of his campaign against the runes, for he is fulfilling his nature as surely as those living floating discs in mage hands. However, by setting his sight on mortal loose ends, to say nothing of anyone who would have been hurt or killed when the concert hall collapsed, he is going far beyond his mandate. As I held the journal with the map through the mists to my next destination, I wondered how Doom could be so callous in regards to collateral damage. Admittedly, in the past few years, I have done a lot of things I am not proud of. Breaking and entering, commanding a hellhound in a demented nightmare carnival, poisoning, but nobody got hurt. Well, maybe somebody got hurt, but nobody I knew. Regards, D.
Living embodiments of magic. Fascinating. Did my little witch note any of these runes made of divine magic? An apothecary employing manifestations of healing spells would be quite useful, and if one could replicate it elsewhere. How long can these runes survive outside of Toontown, or unable to fulfill their function? If a new spell was created within Angelus, would it create a rune as well? There are endless applications for these runes that require further research. Perhaps one could be contained within an object to create a powerful relic. A pity this Doom cannot fathom anything beyond destroying them. As for the magical surges you've been experiencing, you are correct. Wild magic must be its source. Such magic is chaotic as the runes themselves, and uncontrollable. I will research ways to extract it from your being. As beneficial as it has been, it's only a matter of time before it harms you, or someone you care for. Perhaps repeating what triggered the surges in San Francisco will rid you of this curse.
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at darklordaslan. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening.